What's up, everybody? We wanted to take a quick moment to remind each of you to please like, share, comment, subscribe to the podcast. Tommy,
Ring that bell.
ring the bell. It goes a long way to support the podcast. Besides that, Tommy and I offer online coaching. The links for that will be below. The link for my merch store will be below as well. And without further ado, we bring to you a Thinking Man's podcast. A Thinking Man's podcast. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of a Thinking Man's podcast. I'm your host. My name is Joseph PIRCHER. And with me, as always, my good friend Tommy Stiles, fresh off a nice little trip to Florida. Tommy, how you doing, buddy?
Glad to be back in the desert, man.
Yeah, not really much of a climate change, I guess, maybe besides the humidity for you.
It was warmer there. But yeah, Orlando is it's a humid jungle.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to ask you too. We didn't talk about it off air, but I wanted to ask you how. So your girlfriend competed at nationals, and I wanted to see what you thought of the show. I know you've been there before, but what did you think of the show? How, like, both in terms of the competitors and the lineups, but also then like how the show is run compared to other shows that you've seen.
It was a lot better this year because I went last year too with her. It was better ran because on Fridays it was all female divisions. And on Saturday it was all males. So no one had to do a 2-day show, which I think is great.
Nice.
And prejudging went smooth, all the divisions. And then, finals, she was one of the last divisions to go in figure. And I think we were out of there by 8:30.
Oh, beautiful.
Which is always not. Last year, it was like,
nice.
Last year she didn't go on stage till 12:30 in the morning.
Oh, man.
And
in a more muscular division like that, being in figure, or if like you were talking about maybe bodybuilding with that, man, that just changes everything. Like your look changes by the minute, by the hour when you're that lean and when you're ready to go. Yeah. So, man, that's a nightmare. I mean, even I've competed in shows where they told us as bodybuilders that prejudging was going to start at 9 a.m. And then I didn't step foot on stage until 2:30 p.m. And that was a nightmare in itself. So that's interesting. And then competitor wise, any standouts to you? I mean, the guy that won the open bodybuilding, pretty good from what I saw online.
Yeah, he's been Walter Debs. He's been at it for a while. He was top 3 last year.
Yeah.
So he's been knocking on the door. He's like a taller Kai Green, not because of the dreads and stuff, but just like he's got some freaky muscle bellies. He wasn't even 100% peeled, so that just goes to show you how conditioning isn't the only factor. The guy that took second was more conditioned than him, and that dude was a brick tank of muscle. He actually probably could pose himself better and look bigger than he did. I don't know what he weighed in at, that guy that took second, or his name, but he looks like he could do some damage in the 212. And then, a guy from Arizona, Sid Ra, he's someone I'm pretty close with out here. He took third. That was the heavyweight open class was the best class of the whole show. They worked him probably through 4 or 5 rotations. They sent the top 4 off, posed everybody else, and then brought the top 4 back on and ran them again. So it was really like Turner Riddle and I were standing next to each other, and like he's like, I got chills right now, and I was like, dude, my heart, like, this is bodybuilding, this is good shit. So
nice.
Supers, Cole, that was his class, he took it, and I was talking with Turner and Dusty earlier just in our group chat, and Cole is a blue collar bodybuilder in that he lives this 24/7 365. And I think if there's anyone younger people could follow online and get value from, it's just not that he's going to provide flashy content. Just watch how consistent and monotonous his process is year after year. Like, he eats the same foods. He posts his training. It's nothing flashy. He's not sharing a workout of the day. He's doing the same 10 move, and that's bodybuilding. And he's like consistently gotten better. I started following Cole in like 2016, and he was a 3rd call out nationals guy. and then won junior nationals, and then took 2 top 3s and then won his pro card here this year. So I think that really highlights how long of a journey bodybuilding, open bodybuilding truly is. And if that's what you're in, and even the other divisions too, I don't want to shortchange them, but like the national level at all divisions, I will say it's a different animal, because the local level is kind of watered down and there's too many shows, and you could win an overall just because no one was there that given day.
Yeah.
But you will get exposed at nationals. You will, maybe you won an overall and then you're 16th place tied with 10 other people. Like, some divisions had, I want to say classic physique class B had 46 competitors.
Oof.
There was 40 to 50 competitor divisions, wellness, bikini, and men's physique, obviously. But
now, what did you say too? There was a bodybuilding division that had 30 plus, maybe middleweights.
there was 29 middleweights, which it's funny. I think probably a handful of them crossed over into classic because they actually wore their classic trunks on stage for open. But whatever, I was glad to see good numbers for bodybuilding. There was 20 plus light heavyweights, 20 plus heavyweights, and the supers is, we're in this era where it's like not cool to be big anymore. So no one's pushing for mass, probably because it takes the longest. But there was still 13 of them, I think.
Okay, that's still respectable. I mean,
yeah.
So it sounds like bodybuilding is alive and well, despite the mainstream rhetoric that we hear sometimes. And I'm with you. The nationals is the cream of the crop as far as the national level shows.
Nationals is the Super Bowl of pro qualifiers. Like every other show is at best second place to nationals. This is the show people will wait all year to do, and they won't even give themselves any other chances to get a pro card. They'll highlight only nationals because that's the way to get the best competition.
Yeah, which is interesting. I think that's probably just because of the totals. It's interesting though, not to get off on a rant here, and we're going to be getting into a Q&A episode shortly, but just in my own mind, at least, I've kind of always looked at the title of being Mr. USA as being way more prestigious than just the national champion or North Americans champion, which is interesting actually, because when you think about it, you would think that the North Americans would be the most prestigious, because we're not talking about just the US, we're talking about Mexico and Canada as well. So it feels and sounds like you're beating a wider range of competitors. But I'm with you that nationals is kind of the crown jewel of amateur bodybuilding on this side of the world, at least. So very cool, very interesting. Cool to see that you were on the ground there and got like some in-person perspective on it. So let's dive right into it. We got another Q&A episode here, so thanks to everybody that wrote in questions, and we got a good one. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to pose this one to you because we may rant on this for 35 minutes. So I had someone that wrote in and asked, what are your thoughts on hiring a coach that has never competed themselves? What are your thoughts on hiring a coach that doesn't live the lifestyle at all? And what are your thoughts on someone that has never put someone else on stage? And what the way that they're asking this, let's, for argument's sake, let's say in all of these situations, it's someone that is hiring a coach to prep them for a show. The client is, it's going to result in them getting on stage. So those different scenarios, what are your thoughts?
The portion of the question with the coach has never competed, there's no chance I would hire that person ever. Everything I've ever done, all of the people that were teaching me or mentoring me, they had experience doing it themselves at one point or another. My baseball coach played in college. Any firefighter that I learned from in that industry had multiple years of being in fires and on scenes. Every bodybuilding coach I've worked with has walked the walk and competed. So yeah, there's no way I would work with someone who hasn't done what I'm trying to do. How can you tell me what to expect? So leading into the next part, someone who doesn't live the lifestyle, that's probably need more context, I guess, for that individual, but I don't think you have to actively be doing what we're doing, hitting all your meals every day, like living as a bodybuilder, because maybe you reached a point in your life where you want to focus on your coaching, and your pursuit of your own bodybuilding takes away from being a good coach. You can still follow a plan and not be all in on the bodybuilding lifestyle. You can still have goals that are related to your body and your fitness and not have them be bodybuilding related. I mean, that just shows a maturity to me in a person, if that's where they're at. Like, I mean, there is an expiration date on doing this. Like, I know for a fact I'm not going to be eating 6,000 calories, when I'm 45. I don't, fuck that, dude.
Like, you say that now. I don't know about you. I don't know about you, Tom.
I'm not the ageless
never say
wonder.
never. Never say never.
But I just think context is king with that one. Like, now, are they someone who has other business?
Never lived the lifestyle? That would be a problem to me.
Yeah, no, I don't want to work with them. But if they have other business ventures and they're kind of like, they dabble in coaching on the side, I don't think I could work with that person. I do need to work with a person who coaching is their bread and butter of income. They're invested in being a good coach, and they're doing things to improve their craft. You don't necessarily need to, you need to have lived the lifestyle at one point, in my eyes, to understand it and to be able to get the most out of your clients. But you don't need to actively be doing it to necessarily be a good coach or have a brand that's growing, and you work with a lot of athletes. I mean, look at all the top coaches in the game, right? None of them probably live the lifestyle.
That was going to be the point that I made. Like, if you look at Chris Aceto, for anybody listening, you look at him, even somebody like Dave Palumbo, you look at somebody like AJ Sims. None of these guys are currently pursuing bodybuilding, but to the original point, all of them have lived the lifestyle. All of them at one point or another were pretty damn impressive in their own right, whether it was just with the conditioning that they brought, or like in Dave's case, like, he was a fucking monster. That guy knows how to put muscle on. So yeah, that one, it would be a little bit more context dependent, but I almost got that. I'm assuming, but I almost was wondering if they were asking about one of these people that, like, walks around out of shape and then tries to tell people how to be in shape, like hasn't done it themselves.
Yeah, like that. I mean, if you haven't done it yourself, then no, you shouldn't be telling someone how to.
Madness. Yeah.
I don't tell someone how to run a marathon, because I've never fucking run a marathon. Like, I couldn't run a quarter of a marathon. Yeah, no chance. Yeah. So, I think, experience is the number one when we're ranking things. You have to, like, because there's just things you learn that can't be taught from books.
Yeah. Well, there's things that research and books and science and all these things are light years away from even addressing. Like, I've talked about it before on this. There's so many things that have been scoffed at that bodybuilders have anecdotally come across in their experience. And then years later, it's like, oh, wow, the research actually backs this. It's like, yeah, we've known this for 30 years. We've known this. Look at what all these OG bodybuilders were doing. And then, so the last piece of it, because this is its own question, really, is hiring someone to put you on stage if they have never put anyone else on stage.
That's another context question, in a sense.
Give us an example of.
I use myself for example
of each scenario where it would be. Give us a scenario where it's not okay, and then give us a scenario where it is okay.
I think if the coach explains to the client and lets them know up front, you are the first person I am going to be putting on stage, and full disclosure, and that client is okay with that, then there's no problem with it, because there's obviously a trust established. But if the coach uses marketing techniques and a social media guise to make it look like they're about this life, but they've actually never done it, then that is dishonest, and it's just shysty. It's not the morals I would want in a person that I'm investing money in, but also, like, associating my name with. Like, if I was working with someone and something about them morally came out that I couldn't work with, like, I couldn't accept, I would leave that person with you. Even if they were the best coach for me at that point in my career, my morals would not allow me to stay with them. You know what I mean? Like same thing with anything I'm involved in, like if like a friend or something challenges my moral compass, I have to walk away. So I think if they're willing to, like, because the first handful of clients I put on stage, I did it for free. And I also I didn't lie and act like I did say, like, I'm confident in what I'm doing, but also I haven't done this. I did, I have this prep internship that I did with this guy. He's highly reputable. I've worked with a lot of clients, and the clients I was putting on stage, all of them I had coached for over a year already. So I at least had some anecdotal feedback on them individually that I had gotten them results enough to even trust me to get on stage. And I was also, I was working with people that I wasn't working with someone who was ready for the national level or ahead of me. These were all first-time competitors. And I think that's something. Even now, I don't work with people who are better than, like, there's nobody. I didn't have any clients doing nationals. Why? Because I'm not even on that level. So I think the context of it matters. But in the way our industry is, you can market yourself to look like you're this aficionado and like you know the game and you put hundreds of people, like, but when push comes to shove, you've never done it. I mean, I had numerous clients start preps this year, and I could have talked about all of that, but actually getting to the stage, a lot of people start preps and don't finish them. It's just, they obviously, most of them don't talk about it on social media because it doesn't make you look good. But I had numerous clients who started prep, and for whatever reason, maybe it was warranted that the prep didn't finish. Maybe they quit. Maybe they whatever. But I just think the process of putting someone on stage, it's not especially when you want success for that person and they too want success, it's not as simple as like, all right, there's a show in 20 weeks, let's do it. Like, there's a lot of fucking planning that goes into it. Like,
there should be.
I take on a guy today, and like a conversation may start of like, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this, and we'll plan to hit the stage in June of 2024.
Yep.
That's the kind of conversations I'm talking about. It's not like you just wake up one day and like, I'm going to do a bodybuilding show. So I think, I kind of got off the rails there, but
no, that's okay.
The context matters. But also, just the questions you ask the person during the consult can really tell you all you need to know. And usually pricing matters.
Sure.
When I did it for free, and then I did it for a little bit of money, and then I did it for a little more money. And then now it's like, once I had an established business, it's like, okay, I have rates and I'll increase them as demand goes up. And I believe my skills warrant a higher rate, blah, 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 blah. But if like, you take two coaches and they both charge, say, $200 a month, one does this list of things as part of what he provides, and one does this 2 or 3 things, like, that's on you, the buyer of the service, to assess like, hey, what does all this mean?
Right.
So
yeah, I'm not going to say anything groundbreaking that you didn't say already. On the first aspect, that's one that I think should be a prerequisite. I think there's a little bit more gray area and a little bit more room for the final two, where there are scenarios where the coach doesn't necessarily have to be living the lifestyle currently. And then there are scenarios where, as long as the coach is honest about their lack of experience with stage competitors, I think there is a scenario. I mean, we've all had to put somebody on stage for the first time. You know what I mean? Like you said, doing it for free. I even almost tried to talk the first couple of people out of it. I'm like, you're sure you want to do this with me? Like, I haven't done this before, dude. Like, but man, I have a really, really tough time. And there are going to be people that listen to this and disagree. There will be people that coach and want to coach competitors or do coach competitors that have never competed, that may listen to this and take offense to it or whatever the case is. Anyone that's listened to this show knows that I don't give a fuck about that. But
Second that, I don't. Yeah, your feelings do not matter to me.
but I just speaking for myself, and then also thinking from the perspective of anyone that I care about. Like if a girlfriend or a close friend or anybody was like, "Hey, I'm going to hire this coach, and they're going to put me on stage," but they don't do it themselves. They've never actually competed. I would have a really hard time biting my tongue because my gut reaction is to say absolutely not. How in the world can you hire somebody to do this if they have not walked the walk themselves? And so I have a pretty black and white opinion on that one, because how can you act like an expert if you've never felt what it feels like to be contest lean and then get up on a fucking Stairmaster and do it for an hour when it feels like you are going to struggle to do the first 3 minutes, and you do struggle to do the first 3 minutes? How in the world can you tell somebody that they need to do this? Or go train legs 3 weeks out on 0 carbs? Like, there are just certain things that no matter what other experience you have cannot prepare you or cannot fill in the blank for not living through that yourself. So yeah, I'm not gonna beat a dead horse. There's not much to add there. I think we got that. So um actually, so that was my question. So you go.
Dun dun dun. Um. All right. So this is just kind of a general. I guess we can kind of give a quick little metformin recommended dosages, any risk present, and who is candidates to use metformin, who should use metformin.
All right. So first and foremost, everything that I'm about to say is for educational and entertainment purposes only. I'm not a doctor. Under no circumstance should you ever take drug advice from someone on the internet. With that said, I think that for most, so I'm gonna speak on my experience. I'm almost exclusively worked with males, and almost exclusively worked with enhanced males that are pursuing competitive bodybuilding. So in most cases, without just sounding like I recommend like a blanket protocol, most of the time there is an application for metformin in the circumstance of an enhanced male with competitive aspirations. We see that first and foremost, it helps to regulate blood sugar. And so why is that a benefit? So we're going to be in the off season, we're going to be pushing carbohydrate totals that are undoubtedly going to raise blood glucose, insulin, all these things. And then in a lot of scenarios, we're going to be using exogenous growth hormone, which we know can elevate all of our blood sugar markers. So that's kind of a counter to it. But also in bodybuilding, there's a lot of, and just in general life, there's been shown to be other positives. And we know this through human clinical trials. There's a reduction in overall oxidative stress. And just as it has been shown in humans as a general life extension drug. More and more we see in research that a lot of these dysfunctions, diseases, these things later in life that rise up and cause a reduction to your quality of life can be correlated or shown to be directly caused by insulin sensitivity or lack thereof. So tons of benefits to it. As far as a dose, I haven't seen many applications to using more than 500 milligrams. As far as risks or side effects, the big one is that for some people, it causes GI distress to where you would have diarrhea after taking it. And then so an easy solution for that, if it's still going to be part of your protocol, is taking it with your last meal or even after your last meal before bed, as opposed to, I see some people taking it first thing in the morning, and then now you're risking that GI distress on top of having to put 5 or 6 meals down. Doesn't really make sense to me when you think about it. So I personally have never had the GI issues, but even so, I always take it before bed because I just don't want to risk that. If there are other issues, I have not been made aware of that. I've never come across any other negatives or side effects other than that. And even that is very, very uncommon and almost always mitigated by taking it before bed. Now, what was the other aspect of it? Did I miss anything? So starting dose, I would say 500 milligrams. And there's really, I haven't seen many applications of needing to go more. I will just throw this out there again for the argument's sake and entertainment purposes only. There has been the very rare instance where, because there's that overall reduction in just oxidative stress, overall inflammatory stress in the body, I've had a couple guys that really struggle with body acne. And because of that, I've increased their dose to 1,000 milligrams, and we've seen an improvement in the quality of their skin texture. That is not to say that metformin cures body acne. That's not to say that that's something that's being recommended or used in a traditional medical sense. That is just something that I recommended, that the client chose to act on, and we have seen this positive benefit. So, hands off. I'm not a doctor. Absolutely don't listen to me. I'm an idiot. I know nothing. But those are some things that I've noticed in my experience.
I think that covers it. I think the biggest thing is nothing, but in this case, metformin. It's not this magic elixir that's going to cure anything you're dealing with. Everything works together synergistically. So
yes,
I look at a lot of people who don't even have their diet in check, and they're eating all this inflammatory food, high processed sugars, and then they're taking a boatload of metformin on top of that. It's like, maybe if you're having GI distress, maybe it's from the metformin, but maybe it's from your diet and everything else in play.
Other life factors.
Metformin, a lot of type 2 diabetics are on metformin as part of America's pharmaceutical regimen. And I don't see any improvements for them because they're not improving their lifestyle habits. So then, or
even worse, in a lot of those cases that I've seen where that is prescribed by a doctor, and it is intentionally for glucose management for these people that have diabetes. But because the lifestyle doesn't change at all, you see them needing an increasing number, like an increasing dosage. They start at 500, doesn't get the benefit, goes to 1,000. I've seen diabetics that get prescribed up to 2,500 milligrams. And seeing what we've done with bodybuilders on just 500, like we have bodybuilders like you, Tommy. I have guys like you that are shoving 700 grams of carbs, and 500 milligrams of metformin and 10,000 steps a day does the trick.
Yeah, I've taken it at 250 as a dose.
Sure. Actually, going back, I will say you could start at 250. It just seems like that 500 is a sweet spot, but absolutely you could start at 250.
I've done it with select meals too, not even as like an everyday thing, just like if there's a larger carb meal at bed, like whatever. It's context is king, but I do think like it works synergistically with the plan. I have seen post-show, this is more on the female side, there can be some hormonal damage that was done with maybe from the dieting or the length of the prep, the drugs used, etc. So I've seen metformin used as part of a post-show, whether you call it a PCT or just something that needs to be done to address any hormonal issues that were created in prep. And I learned that from Jason Theopold, so I'm going to give credit where it's due. Like, him, Chris Tuttle, John Jewett, like, I know he's one of your educators. Like, these are all guys that we learn from. So we're not necessarily trying to regurgitate information, but I will always give credit to like anybody. Like Chris Tuttle gives me, he teaches me weekly in like 1-minute voice memos. He can break something down so simple, and I'm like, dude,
he gets on the voice memo. Listen, guy, and then just breaks it down for you.
You're a genius. So
Chris is great.
Jason kind of opened my eyes to the application of metformin based off certain cases that warrant it. So, but I do agree, like there are competitive bodybuilders who can benefit from it as part of a prophylactic measure, as part of their plan. Does that mean you need it if you're the one listening? No. I mean,
Maybe.
maybe, yeah, exactly. There's no black and white, it's not something that you just throw in for the sake of throwing in like a multivitamin.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you're up.
Hmm. Okay, so I got to ask this, and this might wind up being long, but it might just be a quick hitter too, depending on how you want to approach it. So I got to ask, should coaches be providing sources to clients?
Oh,
Again, this is for educational and entertainment purposes only.
yeah. I don't
You want
think
to hear my take first or no?
no, I don't think it's something that you should do with every client as part of like, hey, you're going to work with me. I'm going to help you get your products.
Yeah.
I do think it's possible that if you have someone who is about this life and they're invested, then that's not out of the question to give someone some direction on where to acquire things. I will say that if you're the client and that's one of your first questions to a coach upon starting with them, yeah, fuck off. Like,
yeah,
in another life, I had to purchase marijuana before it was legal to get recreationally.
Whoa.
You know what I mean? And there's just a way you carry yourself when you're trying to acquire things that aren't necessarily legal. And I don't know. That's just how you need to carry yourself. Like this, people talk, I think because gear is so openly talked about, people are so nonchalant with talking about it. Like it's just Amazon Prime. Let me get my DECA sent to me. It's like,
right.
Fucking stupid. Like that's not how this works.
100%.
So
that was the feel of the
question, but I think it's just, that's one of the ones that's like really context is king. And I think as a coach, and I've worked with coaches, like if they know you're about this life, and especially you got some years under your belt and you're coming to them having done, you've done cycles and like you've done shows or you're wherever your level is, like they may help you out. They may just, because I've had to question people like, are you sure your source is real? Like,
right.
Are you sure what you're taking is what they like, especially with females, like you don't want to go the route of hoping that the Anavar, the Primo that you're taking is what it is, because there's some serious repercussions that can happen. So
yes,
I just think it's not something that is black and white where the coach should offer it to every single client that competes. But at the same time, like, I want clients to do well. And if like, that's a box that I could help with and help with providing a means, then I will. That's not to say that I'm the one doing the providing, but it's just hey, go this way to get this. Walk down that alley.
Yeah. I think unless you're someone that is seriously lacking in self-awareness, you should have a pretty good understanding of your relationship with your coach to gauge whether or not this is something that you should be talking about or asking about. I think as a coach, if that's part of like your marketing scheme, to me, that's a red flag. As a colleague and as someone that is also a client to another coach, I just think if that's because then I'm like, okay, are you the one slinging this, or are you making a buck off me doing this? Like, what's going on here? Because that's just to the average person that you just meet online and hire you. Now, if there's a really personal rapport that gets built over time, and or the situation arises, like you said, where things just aren't matching up, and you start to question the validity of the products that the person is using, then maybe as a coach, that's your opportunity, if you choose to step in and say, hey, where are you getting these products? And then if you're unsatisfied or unsure of the answer, you may have places to go to get these products that are more trustworthy. But also, like you said, if you're a new client to somebody that you only know online, and like right away you're like, hey, what about this? it's like, fuck off is usually how I want to feel about answering that. Because then that just something about it just feels weird. Um,
Yeah,
so
it's
I don't
our
know, like,
conversation terminates right there.
yeah. So um, be mindful of that as a client. Like we did a whole episode on what it means to be a really good client. Don't hit your new coach with that right away. Like, I tend to be like a super control freak, like I talked about. Like, I just want to make sure we have everything in order to get the most out of our efforts. But I've had to take a step back and let people just fend for themselves a little bit, especially when it comes to acquiring illegal drugs. Like, I want to help, but it's like, fuck, man. Like, I do this for myself. Like, you're a big boy. Like, why don't you pull up your big boy pants and find this? Like, if you're about this life to the point that you're going to hire a coach, like, and you're going to put these products into your body, like, you need to figure it out for yourself. And then after every avenue has been exhausted and there's been a really personal rapport that's been built over time, then I might point you down a certain avenue, like you said. But um, I think it's always just context dependent. Like, how did the person come about it? What's the relationship? Even just how does the person say it? Like you said, like even in years past, like trying to buy weed or whatever the case is, like if you are super abrasive or way out in the open about it, like, man, you come across the wrong people, like you're gonna run into some trouble. So got to be careful. Got to be mindful that this shit is still very, very illegal.
Unfortunately, yeah, British and Canada, or the UK and Canada, I know, and I think Mexico actually, there's no
There's no
illegality
rules.
to possessing it. You can walk in just like we can buy marijuana. They can buy.
See, I don't know. I'm not totally sure on that. I think that Canada and England, it's decriminalized in terms of just having it for yourself.
That is true. I misspoke. You can't walk in off the street and go
But
buy.
Mexico, you can walk in like it's a candy store or like a weed dispensary in Las Vegas. Because I had a client that just got back and he went to Mexico with his family. And he was like, yeah, I walked into the pharmacy and like I was about to just fly back with a bunch of growth hormone and my mom damn near had a heart attack. Like, but you can just walk into the pharmacy down there and they have a pretty much anything that you can think of.
Well, that's how guys in the '90s used to. Out where I live, like I heard of convoys going down and like, hey, we're going to get some stuff. What do you need? And then it's like this daring
guys from Southern LA, like Southern California or anything. Yeah.
It's this daring mission to get back into the US.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing like piling 5 juice heads into a Volvo and then telling the border that you're just going down there to check out the beach.
Sightseeing.
All right. Yeah. So that was a good one. So you're up, pal. What do you got?
All right. Getting off the chemistry questions. How do you know when to switch up your training program?
Good question. There's many scenarios where it may be appropriate to change your training program. The first one, as a general response, blanket response, I would say have your recovery capacities or your ability to recover shifted dramatically, meaning has your sleep quality taken a major shift for the positive or for the negative? Has your PED use shifted dramatically one way or another? Like if you're pushing tons of drugs and you're on a high volume training program trying to really hammer certain body parts and bring them up, and then now it's time to come down to like a TRT cruise type phase because of your health, you're not going to be able to recover from the same amount of volume. And you're probably not going to be eating the same amount of food. So that's a great time to reassess what you're doing in the gym. That doesn't mean that you start training like a pussy. That just means that you need to make the most out of the volume that you are going to do because you can probably only recover from so much. I think another good time would be speaking on advanced lifters. I think another good time would be you are about to or in the midst of a deload after smashing yourself for 6, 7, or 8 weeks, and you've realized like, hey, for the last training block, I was really prioritizing my shoulders and my arms. And then now as this deload approaches, I realize that they've come up and my lats and my hamstrings could actually benefit to come up. So now you've reassessed what the biggest priorities are. That would be a good time to adjust the training program. So it's on and on and on. Your ability to recover is going to guide this. So one of the aspects of that also that I didn't touch on would be if you're starting to feel connective tissue problems, little injuries that pop up, like you are just not recovering from what you're currently doing. So either volume totals need to change, or a lot of times it's just exercise selection that needs to change. And then also where you are within your season. Undoubtedly, as you get deeper and deeper into contest prep, you are going to have to lower the volume at some point. And that may mean even adjusting how often or how many days a week you rest. So that's a good time to take a good look at your training. Again, not an excuse to start training like a pussy, but the plan itself may need to be adjusted.
Yeah, I think, those are all good points to consider. The guy that asked this is like, so for his context, he's a national level bodybuilder. I think, once you've gotten a certain level of strength, there are different considerations that have to be made. And I've had to do this in 2022 is like, how much stronger am I actually going to get when we're talking actual loads? Like,
right.
I can pull a house, but at what point is it becoming detrimental to being a better competitive stage bodybuilder? Yes. Now, if I was just doing this for the gram, fuck yeah, I'm getting a 700-pound deadlift and I'm going to make sure everyone knows about it. But my goal is to be the best bodybuilder I can be and put together the best physique right now. I'm not saying at some point I won't go for that, but so I learned this from Cole Eastfold, who I mentioned earlier in the show. Like, he changes movements every 8 weeks simply because at his age and how long he's been doing this, he said he runs into issues when you get too much progress. Like, there's just certain loads that are kind of your cap point. And I found that for myself too. Like, maybe I could add 10 or 15 more pounds on a certain press, but am I going to pop a fiber in my chest or feel a shoulder tweak because of it? So I think there's some like, if you've been doing this a while and you're in your 30s or even older, there is some things you have to think about with your training programming, as far as like, maybe you can only push hard with heavy loads for 6 to 8 weeks. And then you just need to change the program for the simplicity of still being able to keep training to avoid the ROI has to still be there. Now, if you're younger and you're listening to this, like a lot of my clients, fuck off. I ran the same program for like 18 months before.
2 years.
It didn't change a fucking thing. So there's no reason if you're not strong, then just keep training, keep getting stronger. I don't care if you are stuck in a plateau of like doing the same way over and over and over again. That's just part of the law of repetition. And I think with all this information being put out about training, which is great on one hand, on the other hand, it's like, it's making people think they always need to be doing new movements that are trending on IG at the time, or TikTok. And man, I did the same things for a lot of body parts for years and years and years. And those body parts grew simply because I just kept doing the movement and trying to get better at it every time for years and years and years. I do think the law of repetition and consistency, just the training program and the split, that's all like X's and O's. But I think if you zoom out and just look at what we're trying to do, we're trying to build more muscle. As long as you're showing up, giving your best effort, and trying to progress in some way or another, you're gonna see results.
I think that point about essentially like the runway that you have with strength on movements is a big consideration. That's a great point that I left out, but that is a great point.
More strength doesn't always equal more hypertrophy. And
at a certain point, there's a limit to the return. There's a diminished return at a certain point. Like you said, like I've at a certain point, like with certain presses, I know that I can only incline dumbbell a certain amount until it's going to take me being a little shaky and a little ugly with the reps. And then it's like, is this even worth it to where I might tear something and not be able to press for 6 months? Because I've done that. I know where that line is because I've crossed it more times than I would have liked to.
Right.
But yeah, those are all really good ones. And then I will say this is a little bit of like some new age stuff. And this is again for people that are advanced, not for people that are less than 6 years into serious bodybuilding lifestyles. At some point, you are going to mentally burn out on the same exact training plan.
Yeah.
Whether it's the split or whether it's the movements or whether it's even the rep range or the order of the movements. A slight change in any of those can help refresh that training desire and that like passion towards training. And I have found that that is one little thing that you can change that goes a long way for somebody that's advanced, that's just a little burnt out on the current plan.
Yeah, Dante told me when I was programming for after junior nationals last year, he just said, you're at a point now where you have to think outside the box. It's not about which movement is the best and this and this and this.
Right.
What areas are lacking and what can I do to improve them that I'm not doing? And so a lot of my guys and girls now, like when they might hit a strength plateau or whatever, I'll just say, let's keep the movement, but now let's incorporate a pause at the start or at the contraction and the stretch of each rep. And then basically I've given you a whole new platform to progress on.
Yes. Yeah. They're new parameters. You can progress within these parameters now. And it's almost
variables.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. And that's the one that I use often too, where I'll recommend that to a client just from watching their training videos, where like a hack squat or any squat variation that we have in is a perfect example, because I went through this where I started getting into, I was barbell back squatting for years. And like I said, I think it absolutely helped me build a foundation for my legs. But at a certain point, I started to get to loads that using them in like hypertrophy rep ranges started to just feel beyond risky to me. Like there's a certain level of anxiety and excitement that comes with attacking a leg workout, but it started to get beyond that to where I'm now thinking about like my safety and my future in bodybuilding because of some of the loads I was using. So then it was like I was still kind of ego driven and not wanting to drop the barbell back squat. And it was like, well, what can I do to keep this movement in, but will give me additional runway to make progress while also feeling like not completely vulnerable to injury? And it was pausing it in the hole. You implement a firm 1 or 2 second count in the depths of a squat, you are talking about a completely new movement. And you are going to need to reassess and readjust the loads that you're using because it's not going to be the same. And man, for my money, like we are always talking about like stretch under load being like the best part of a rep range. If you need to build some legs, pause your fucking squats, reset the weights and reset how you think about things, and pause and just sit in the hole of a squat and let that be your new standard. And in 6 months, see if you haven't built some legs.
Guaranteed. I think, if we're talking advanced lifters, somebody that's not a greenhorn and really just learning about this life, I think anything less than 12 weeks with any training program is not enough time to get enough feedback. So I would say 12 weeks. And then, if you've been doing this a while and you're noticing some of the things that we just mentioned, as far as like strength issues at a certain point, like maybe 18 weeks being the cap. That's kind of like how I've run programs for 4 to 5 months this year and then made changes based off of the changes I was making. So it's like, I wanted to prioritize my chest. I still do.
Right.
What movements are working, what movements aren't, what movements am I stalled on, what movements can I still progress on? And then it's all about exercise order, taking the same movements that you're doing in a given program and just changing the order around. That's now you've created a new program with the same. So it doesn't always need to be this revolutionary change, changing the especially like if you're someone whose gym is very limited with equipment and isn't
Right.
well stocked with all these awesome pieces we've talked about on previous podcasts, like you're going to have to get creative with it, or you're going to have to work with a coach who can get creative for you. I mean, I've got guys with home gyms who have like 4 options, and it's like, all right, we're doing 4 count pauses in the bottom here because you have no other option.
Yeah. We're doing 2 pre-exhaust movements before we get back to this press. Like, yeah. But that's what makes this so much fun too. Like, there's a lot of fun in having to get creative. So yeah, I think those are all good considerations. I got one. Another programming one actually, and I thought this one was interesting. So I didn't realize how many people that we have that care to listen to this that aren't competitive bodybuilders or aspiring to be competitive bodybuilders. But I had somebody that asked programming for someone that's considering a transition from powerlifting to bodybuilding. So this guy was a competitive powerlifter. And he also followed that up and said, in this scenario, what common themes do you see in terms of missing body parts, which I thought was interesting also. So in the scenario that someone is coming from powerlifting and they've always focused on powerlifting, and now they want to come over and improve their physique and maybe even compete in bodybuilding, regardless of what division it is. What would you do programming wise? And then also, what do you see that's lacking in those like typical powerlifting physiques? Of course, it's context dependent and individual, but I think there are some common themes.
I see chest development is usually lacking. Pressing strength can be crazy, but
through the roof. Yeah.
The development of chest as part of the physique is usually subpar. And the lower half, very narrow legs, no adductors really. Maybe some dominant glutes from obviously squatting and deadlifting, but quads are very shallow, might lack a lot of shape. The legs from the front just look very narrow. It's like you can tell the person lifts weights, but it's just, I mean, they may even have a thigh gap depending on how big they are.
Yes.
Like, there's just a lot of missing parts of the legs. And that's just from, it depends on if this powerlifter was someone who took their accessory movement seriously, or if they're just like focused on the big 3 and kind of half-assed their other ones. I'm guessing if they listen to this podcast, they're pretty invested in their strength training. So the program considerations would just be around that. And then also when you get someone that's super strong, whose main mentality has been, I need to move this fucking weight A to B, I think you need to reset them to teach them how to make sure the muscle that they're training is initiating the movement. For chest, for example, like I'm still hammering away trying to get chest development. I got delts for days, but it's just a matter of still chasing that perfect connection out of the hole on every press, and then locking out that contraction, squeezing my chest together without rolling my shoulders forward and picking my chest. There's just so many considerations for cues that I have the overall strength. It's improving the efficiency of the strength I have. And I think with a powerlifter who, say they had a 400 to 500 pound bench, like, yeah, that's cool. But now it's time to like humble yourself and learn how to make 225 hard while using your chest. Same thing with the first thing I would do with powerlifters is, you just mentioned the pausing. I would a ton of pause movements for their squatting, their leg presses, high rep leg presses, because I think they need more volume to build out their legs. And then, obviously the rest is kind of I'm sure most powerlifters are lacking arms. So maybe some focus on the isolation.
I was going to say, as a general theme, what I see missing is width. Because everything's in this like front to back frontal plane, right? And so it's like, what's really missing? Like lats specifically, because when you look at the back, it's like that trap erector column usually looks thick as fuck on guys that have been powerlifting for years, but then there's no sweep to the lats. And then same thing for the legs. From the side, they might have thick ass quads, but from the front, it lacks the sweep. And then same thing when you get to the upper body, they might have super, or even like you were saying, lack of chest. I see some guys that have a huge chest and
Yeah.
huge front delts, but then there's no sweep to the side delts, because these are all these little specific movements that you have to do if you want to grow them out. Like they're not just going to happen on their own. So those are the ones that I see. And then, like you said, like the programming considerations, you made a great point. And I think you would almost, one, you'd have to tell them to expect to use half of the loads that they're using across the board. There's probably going to be I would probably not have somebody bench, and I would probably not have somebody pulling deadlifts or rack pulls, because you've been doing that your whole life. Like we have that foundation. Now let's go build everything else. And then also, I think a cool consideration, I got this idea as you were talking. It's kind of what you were saying, but I almost think as far as cueing and getting them to make lighter weights hard, I almost think that there would be a good application in pre-exhausting before almost any compound movement that you were going to do, just to make you feel that individual muscle and squeeze the fuck out of that individual muscle before you go moving shit from A to B. Because then one, it's gonna activate the muscle and you're gonna feel it more. But then also, just by default, it's gonna limit those loads that you were using to begin with, like we said. So it's super interesting. I feel like we could probably talk about this for an hour plus, this topic alone, because it's a cool thing. And it's fun to hear that somebody that has been on that side of the fence so long wants to come over to this side of the fence. Because there's a lot of people that we've seen recently that, whether it's because of injuries or longevity, or they've already reached all the heights that they want to in powerlifting, we've seen a handful of people come over to bodybuilding and have a lot of success, because it's like, man, they've slapped on a hell of a foundation of just dense muscle. And then now it's a matter of like tweaking the training and what's being targeted to bring a more like shapely, round bodybuilding look. Bree Terry is an example on the female side of things, where she's like a world record holding powerlifter. And then she came over and right away had national level success in bodybuilding. And then what's Buddy's name? He was crazy deadlifter, and he won last year at USA's.
Oh, Ben Pollock.
Ben Pollock. Yeah. And that was
very
another guy.
Too.
Yeah. Oh, super intelligent. What's his thing is like Dr. Deadlift, or is that a different guy?
I think it's PhD.
Oh, okay. PhD. Yeah, I knew there was some type of.
But another consideration that isn't necessarily training programming, but will help with everything we just said, is if you're a powerlifter who's never been lean before, that would be the first. I would also like, hey, we're going to get lean, because mind muscle connection gets better the leaner you are. So in order to tap into some of these things we're talking about, you might just need to be lean as a base and then build your strength from there.
You may also see in that scenario too, especially if PEDs are in place, you may find that is a rare scenario where you could get leaner and also improve and grow certain body parts at the same time, especially if PEDs are in place, because it's going to be such a new stimulus compared to what you've been doing. You're going to burn the fat as you make an attempt to get leaner. But because there's so much new stimulus in place, and the overall like systemic tax of bodybuilding training, I think, has to be less than powerlifting training. So it's not like you're not going to be able to recover, especially with drugs in place. So that would be interesting. That would be super interesting to see, kind of like one of these typical kind of like doughy, very strong powerlifters just get serious as hell about a fat loss bodybuilding plan with PEDs in place, and watch them just kind of morph. So anybody that's listening to this that's in that scenario, if you want to be part of that experiment, you could hire me or Tommy and we'll do it for you.
Yeah. I have a guy who I took on, and like over the course, he was powerlifting, strongman background, been training for almost 20 years. And I mean, we dropped over 30 pounds in 9 weeks, but we were adding calories every week because he was just mowing through it. Because he'd never really dieted before. So when you clean up things, you remove processed foods, and this is just on TRT. So, that foundation is built if you took your powerlifting or strength building, strongman, whatever, seriously, you do have a foundation of muscle that just can't be
You can't fake that. You can't replicate
you're ahead of somebody starting in bodybuilding who doesn't have that background. I'll tell you that.
100%. I mean, even Ronnie was a pretty solid power lifter himself, and then brought it over to bodybuilding. Absolutely not promising.
Over too.
John was serious as a power lifter as well. Not promising that you're going to be Ronnie Coleman or John Jewett, but that would be the hell of a marketing strategy, right? Yeah, come on over from powerlifting. I'll turn you into one of those guys. I think that's an hour though. Have you been taking time? I think that's an hour. I know you had some other ones. Let's save it.
All right.
We'll save it for the Patreon.
I had one more good one, so we'll holster it.
Yeah, let's holster it. That's a good call. All right, guys. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks again to anybody that wrote in questions. As always, Tommy and I are happy to answer questions and have conversations in the DMs. We're just regular dudes that love training and love bodybuilding. Just because we put our face on a podcast doesn't mean that we won't answer you guys. So for Tommy Stiles, I'm Joseph PIRCHER. This was a Thinking Man's podcast. And until next time, we are out. A Thinking Man's podcast.